On today's podcast, we have Amos Wittenberg, the CEO and co-founder of Unwritten. Well, Amos, thank you so much for joining us here on the Reindustrialized Podcast. We're super excited to have an opportunity to learn more about your founder journey and around the work you're doing at Unwritten, and moreover, how it relates to these broader topics that we talk about with respect to the industrialized world.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So we like to always start off these conversations with a little bit of a background. Can you tell us your path to Unwritten?
Yeah, I guess lots of founders have what don't feel like very typical career paths. I don't know if mine is more or less atypical, but I started off my career as a financial journalist. So I was editor-in-chief of a publication called KYC 360, writing about financial crime and counter-terror financing, which was a completely new topic to me at the point that I joined the publication. So I had the very enjoyable journey of ramping up and learning about that world. And then I went off to Beijing to do the Schwarzman Scholars Program, which we both did, and did a quite significant career pivot and ended up, on graduating, moving back to London and joining Palantir Technologies. And I joined in the capacity really of a technical writer. So the skill set was broadly the same as I'd been exercising, learning about this technical world of financial crime, and then trying to communicate that to a non-expert audience. But in this case, I was talking about Palantir's products and how they might fit into particular government projects. But at a certain point, about 2 years in, COVID hit, lockdowns hit. I had a lot of spare time. I felt a bit stuck at home. I'd done quite a lot of writing about Palantir's products at that point, and I kind of decided that either I was going to leave or I was really determined to try and use the opportunity, being in a very technical organization, to learn some of that technical skill set. And so whilst I don't want to overstate my data science or engineering abilities by any means, I was able to gradually teach myself some basics there and move over into a kind of a customer-facing data science role, something like that.
Okay.
At almost exactly the same moment, I met Dr. Philip Marks, who was also working at Palantir. He'd done his PhD before joining in climate physics.
Okay.
And we started to see, with some other colleagues, we started to see opportunities across Palantir's client base to bring climate-shaped, sustainability-shaped problems into the solutions that Palantir was providing as a kind of broad enterprise software platform. And so we ended up being involved in the creation of Palantir's first ever climate data solution that was configuring Palantir's software to serve those customers and then some net new customers as well, with problems that were big data problems and also sustainability and climate problems. We did that for a couple of years. That was the route for both of us into founding Unwritten. What we observed and learnt in that role, and particularly the work that we started to do with a number of financial institutions. So when we left in 2022 to found the company and to focus on the quantification in dollars and cents and the kind of so what of climate risks, it was based on what we'd observed and the technical solutions that we built in that team at Palantir.
Very interesting. And so this journey of sort of technical writer to consumer or client facing, and now to, in some ways, back to the financial reporting, but with the climate angle, is a story and a journey that's not that, disjointed in the way that you might have introduced it at the beginning. There is actually a level of continuity there that makes a lot of sense, and probably made a lot of sense to the investors who deployed with you all.
I guess you always have the opportunity to tell a narrative to be as coherent or incoherent as you like, right? But yes, I definitely think there are threads that connect. Now I look back, I'm not sure that as I was going through that process, I was particularly aware that I was sort of following,
As they say, hindsight is 2020, right? 2020 vision and hindsight, and that's very much sort of the case when you get a chance to write that narrative going back. So let's talk a little bit about the work or that Unwritten is doing with clients. What exactly is the product offering?
We build a product called Unwritten 360, which is a comprehensive view of climate risk and opportunity, primarily geared towards private market investors. So we can look at any company, actually public or private, and we take some relatively straightforward information about its financial position, the sectors that it operates in, where its physical assets are, and so on. And we enrich that with all of the climate analytics that we develop and integrate in-house, meaning we can tell you in dollars and cents under different climate pathways, how will that company's cash flows potentially be affected in a faster transition in a net zero world versus a slower transition? How exposed are its physical assets to things like wildfires, floods, cyclones, and so on? And then really concretely, based on not future-looking scenario projections, but what we know about the world today, what policies is it exposed to that relate to climate change? What are its potential climate litigation risks? What technologies could it adopt to make its operations more efficient and also greener, or conversely that its competitors might adopt that could be a competitive threat? So we're trying to bridge that gap with the information that we provide to our clients from the reporting problem, which is critical and which is a large focus of many of our clients' work, to the so what. So ideally, whenever you're reporting risk, you're also able to inform your deal team, the companies that you're working with, what they can do about those risks, how they can be more resilient, how they can capture the opportunities that climate change presents in many cases. And we provide the information to give people the starting point to cross that bridge from the reporting to the so what.
And where is the information coming from?
Quite a broad range of sources. I guess climate change is such a big thing. I don't mean to be trite, but in the ways in which it's huge. The ways in which a given company might be exposed to climate change are really, really broad. Yeah. And it's from modeling flood risk to one of its assets, all the way through to looking at, for companies that are highly exposed to consumer, their reputational risk, for example. And I think that...
And like you just talked about litigation risk as well, so that there's a whole other body of data to pull from.
No, I mean, exactly. And often the information that we surface about companies is really unexpected. It doesn't always follow on litigation risk, for example, that the companies that you expect to have exposure do, and often companies you would imagine that would have very limited chance of being sued on climate-related matters actually are quite highly exposed, particularly things like kind of packaged foods, consumer goods, but areas where there are often claims around greenwashing, for example. So I think this is often a key challenge for our clients that we with Unwritten 360 are helping them to solve. I am the only expert in my fund and for all of my portfolio companies on this extremely broad range of issues. And I should say that we focus on climate, but often our clients' roles are even broader than that, and they incorporate other aspects of sustainability and governance and so on. So the demand on them, the expertise that they need to bring to the role is really vast. And we're trying to provide for climate that comprehensive, that 360 starting point, so that their conversations with the different stakeholders that they're working with are always entirely informed.
Yeah, I wonder, I guess, how then do you... I'm a fund manager. I have responsibility for reporting across my portfolio, which has, maybe some investments that are exposed to potential risks as I have identified them, right? Maybe it's climate risk. They're based in Bangladesh or they're in the southern coast of Florida. And, you are helping to make sense of what those risks might be. But from a standpoint, like what are the sources, if it's possible to talk about them, that are going into the model for Unwritten 360 that give me as a fund manager the opportunity to say, okay, like I know that Unwritten 360 is taking into account, I don't know, XYZ. I don't know exactly what those things are, but what are those sources that serve as input for the model that helps to identify risks?
Totally. So we think of ourselves as a starting point, as a kind of search engine for climate risk, meaning we've developed our own sources, and we've brought in third-party sources for the different components of climate risk. Sometimes that's relatively straightforward, like policies. There are a number of data sets out there in the world that you can access that break down climate policies by jurisdiction, by the kind of policy, by the year that they were introduced, and so on. But the work that we do is to surface the right ones for the right company, which is no trivial matter. In other areas, particularly the forward-looking quantitative modeling that we do, that's IP that we've been developing since the company was started, with a team of economists that we have in-house, and then with the relationships that we have with a number of prominent academics in the climate finance and ESG space. And that's, how do you take broadly accepted models for different pathways for climate change and for the transition, and translate that very concretely into, this is a building services company and its revenue in the UK might go up by 5% by 2035 as a result of demand from the transition, but the amount of money it has to pay for power will go up by 30%. So, translating the macro climate view, very high level, into its financial implications for a single company, that's modeling IP, forward-looking modeling that we've been developing in-house for a long time.
Okay, understood. So it's really about taking in, like you said, these top line, very large data sets that are not specific at all, and trying to understand, like using probably a number of parameters, the implications that those things have for your particular clients. And that could mean like a deep dive on one particular element, but it also could mean that you are helping them, like you said, unsurface things that they didn't even think about before. Because I'm sure when they come to you, they're coming with a problem in hand. Like, we want to be able to report on risk related to, we've been talking about flooding for particular across our portfolio, or we want to just have a better understanding of our exposure in our investments in Latin America. And they say, okay, we don't really know what we're looking for, but you guys can help us unsurface that. And now I'm getting a sense of how, through external data, right, that's these data sets that are available, plus your proprietary sort of frameworks, you're able to, again, bring that information to the top that allows for you to make a recommendation to them, or not even necessarily a recommendation, but make an offer to them to tell them what exactly is potentially impacted through climate change.
Yeah, and I think the question that hovers around this, if you were quizzing me to potentially invest in Unwritten, right, I think the question you might be asking is, what's your moat? And that's kind of the gist of some of these. And I think the answer is that in the past, when we started as a business, I might have said, oh, it's in the complexity of our modeling, and we're really, really good. And we have this team of, half of our technical team is PhDs, and we're really good at building these forward-looking financial models. And I think we've come to realize that to talk about climate risk effectively, you can't hand over one answer that's a number. And so we've broadened our focus to give the numbers and then the narrative behind the numbers.
Yeah, you're getting scenarios. Yeah. And then scenarios have numbers attached to them. There's scenario A, things go to the dumpster, and these are the opportunities, or this is the impact. Scenario B, things, end up on the curb, but they're not terrible. Situation C. And then, that's what people are looking for, I'm sure. They're not looking for a number, because no one can predict the future, but they're looking for, a range that they can operate in with respect to this impact.
I think they're often looking for the components of an answer that allow them to come to their own conclusion, given, we will never hold the expertise that our clients hold about the way that they invest and about their individual portfolio companies. So it's all the components of an answer and the different ways of thinking about that question that can be translated into robust reportable information on the one hand, the disclosure piece, and then what kind of useful, how do I make decisions about this on the other. And I would say that increasingly our moat has evolved to being, we give you a huge amount of very relevant information in one place very quickly. And it's actually not that, with the exception of the quantitative side, you couldn't go and surface that information elsewhere. Yeah. And I think in many cases you could, but there's a huge resourcing crunch there. Yeah. So it's not
they don't have
magic
a team
for information. It's exactly. It's simply the accessibility of that information and the ways in which we've brought our own expertise to kind of curate and refine it.
That's really interesting. Can you talk about the reporting piece, because I think now we dove pretty deeply into understanding sort of the insights that are given around climate scenarios, but talk about this reporting. And obviously every jurisdiction has an ever-changing set of regulations and rules around reporting. And are you helping sort of your clients navigate this multi-jurisdictional way of reporting for climate topics?
Totally. So I would say there are probably two fundamental types of products in the climate ESG software reporting space. And one type are workflow tools, and one type are intelligence tools, data platforms. So in the workflow tool, it's information that you and your portfolio companies or the companies that you're working with already have. Yeah. So it's tools that make it really easy for you to gather information. What are your carbon emissions? What do you do? How much did you spend on X, Y, Z? Collect those from individual companies, bring them up into a centralized place, aggregate, and report against different reporting standards. So Novato would be a great example of that. And the other side of the equation is intelligence tools. It's let me give you some information that I have, and you're going to enrich it with all this intelligence and analytics about the kind of, in our case, the broader implications of climate change. So we definitely sit in that category. And what we're doing with reporting is specifically on climate risk. So the starting point for really, I think, almost all reporting frameworks around climate risk was the TCFD.
What does the TCFD stand for?
It's the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and it created this taxonomy, which has just more or less persisted even as different pieces of, even as it's kind of been subsumed into a different body, and as different reporting regulations have evolved in different places. Most recently in California, actually. But it created this taxonomy that said climate risk is transition risk and physical risk, and maybe also we split out legal risk, sometimes not. And you should think about within transition risk, markets, policy, technology, litigation, reputation. You should apply scenario analysis with at least 3 scenarios across physical risk and transition risk. So it created this whole way that the industry over the last 10 or so years has really kind of adopted as thinking about what the universe of climate risk is and how to capture that. So what we did when we built the product was we went out and we read every single private equity firm's TCFD report or related sort of sustainability disclosures that we could find. Mm-hmm. And we said, what is the absolute highest level of granularity that anyone has been willing or able to publish?
Okay.
And let's make sure that out of the box, you've got that. So you've got that complete view across all the prescribed areas of risk under different scenarios, super granular breakdowns down to the level of individual assets. Most people are not going to go and publish all of that in their sustainability report. But what we do know is that whatever they choose to publish, they'll have the information readily available there, and obviously you can export it so it's structured. But also what we've seen happen in the broader landscape is that there are kind of frustratingly inconsistent data requests from different bodies. So you have the public disclosures you're doing annually, but then you also have requests from different LPs, for example, and then you may also be helping individual companies do their CSRD reporting. So the goal for us was, what's the single source of truth? Okay. So that whatever anyone asks you for, you should be able to find the data here in this one place.
That is, I'm sure, a huge help for the funds that you work with. I'm curious, why the focus on financial reporting as opposed to reporting in general across in enterprises for these topics?
You mean why the focus on investors?
Yeah, investors, exactly. Is there a particular? Yeah, well, what was the focus that, like, why did they become the ideal customer profile for this?
It's funny. I'm just remembering a conversation that we had on my co-founder's balcony while we were still both at Palantir when we were thinking about which direction to take the business in. And we said, should we go after investors or do we think more about real economy and why? And at the time we had quite a different thesis for the business is the truth. Like that. Sorry.
If it doesn't evolve, then, you know, are you doing it right? So I would hope that it's not exactly the same as it was on the balcony.
Exactly. I mean, so at the time we thought, what's our kind of lever for influence? You know,
Okay.
we want to, we don't, I don't think that building a climate software business right now is the best way to get rich quick, right? That wasn't explicitly the goal. We were kind of doing it because we really wanted to be working in the climate space and we wanted whatever we built to be commercially successful, of course, and to help clients with the problems that they had, but also to have an influence in reducing global carbon emissions in some way or another. And our thesis was, if you can model the financial impacts of climate change really convincingly in a lot of detail, then investors will build that into the way that they value companies. And so you'll help the market reprice the impacts of climate change, and that will flow through such that, you know, more money flows towards climate solutions, whatever. That whole kind of let the market sort it out type of thesis. And that does happen in different ways in lots of cases. It wasn't the right use of the data that we were able to produce, really. And I think along the way, we obviously learned a lot more about the kinds of clients that we were selling to. We made the decision at a certain point to shift our focus towards private markets for a range of reasons, for example. But I think we stuck with the focus on investors and particularly private market investors, even though our basic thesis of influence had changed, because we discovered the role of the ESG team particularly in private market investment firms. And we got really, really interested in and kind of captured by some of the unique aspects of that particular role.
Which sounds like there was willing customers as well. And
which is helpful.
Yeah. That oftentimes is how you build the go-to-market strategies based on who's willing to have the conversation, and more importantly, who's willing to purchase and put their money where their mouth is. Absolutely.
And we certainly ran exercises where we said, well, we always kind of thought that this type of profile would be really interested in what we're doing, but you know, they never respond to our emails. Whereas these people, they sort of do. So clearly we're saying something right. Like let's dig into that. But we kept the focus on investors in the end, because we found this group of people who had this pretty unique mandate where, on the one hand, they needed the kind of data that we were producing because it's part of their responsibility to comply with different kinds of disclosure requirement. But they also have a mandate to move from the disclosure to the what do we do about it. And we thought that we could pretty uniquely in the market provide them the information that would allow them to start doing that. And then the more that we worked with those sorts of teams, the more conviction we built there, the more we also, I think, appreciated just how difficult their role is and how impactful that they could be when things went right. And so we've built the focus around that. Excuse me.
No, it seems like a very diligent and thoughtful way of approaching building the business, right? You go where there are opportunities and you go where your product has a natural fit. And it seems like there's a natural fit there. To talk a little bit about what the feedback has been from users of it, can we, like, what do they say once they've started to see the level of depth? You said out of the box, you're giving them probably best in class reporting that they did not have access to before. And I'm guessing that you're also providing, with your additional modules on top of that, even more reporting that their minds are blown. So I'm curious, what has the feedback been from early clients and users?
I'd say minds are blown. we aspire to. I don't want to be modest, and we launched the latest iteration of our product very, very recently, and so we're certainly still on that journey of gathering feedback. I think that there have been a range of pieces of early user feedback that I've really enjoyed, and some have been geared towards actually don't tell us the answer. I would describe, don't tell us the answer. Give us, because you're not going to be as good at getting to the answer as we are, because we know more than you, right? So give us the components of the answer, give us the information, make sure it's complete and robust. Concretely, we will often in the platform come up with an EBITDA number. So in 2035, climate adjusted EBITDA in a net zero scenario is plus 13%.
And do you have access to any of the data that from their side, or is this your estimations based on the platform itself?
So we'll know
Like
a
top
decent
line
amount of
numbers.
information about the
Okay.
company. So we'll know its revenue and its COGS and SG&A
Okay.
and its revenue splits. And so we have reasonable information to come up with a number like that. But I think the point is, I think that the feedback would be, we might take that number at face value. We might use that number for reporting purposes because we believe in the quality of the modeling. But actually, if the goal here is also to diligence a company really effectively in a deal, or if the goal is to engage with the company on its risk profile, that number is way less useful than your projection, which sits 3 lines below it, about how the price of electricity is going to shift. And much rather that we understood all the component pieces like that,
I see.
which we can't get elsewhere,
Yeah.
and we use that to build our conclusion.
Interesting. So what they're looking at is essentially they're looking for these inputs. They have their own quote unquote algorithms, we'll call that, but it's just like the, investment manager who's crunching numbers in the back end, but they want to have as many inputs as they can that are, data driven, as you said, reliable, accurate, that they can use to say, okay, if we move these levers around, where do we get? And obviously the climate reporting is one piece of that, but they're also wanting to take in, a number of probably other things that may not necessarily be on Unwritten's agenda.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to see the range of ways, and we're learning this all the time, but the range of ways in which people might want to use that data as well, because it's not always, in fact, I would say it's quite rarely to have a new number to feed into a discounted cash flow model. Like, it's much more often, I'm going to take this number to give me a sense of the kind of magnitude and directionality of risk. Because look, the one thing we all know about all of these numbers is they're all wrong. That's the nature of projected numbers. They can't tell you the future. But I might go and take that number and use it to have a really hard-hitting conversation with a chief risk officer. Or I might go and take the assessment you've done on a whole fund and go and speak to the GP of that fund and ask them how they think about managing these risks in their own investment process. So generally, yes, the kind of crunchy, credible little bits of information can be way more valuable than the overall summary answer.
So you've described the climate transition as like both a risk and an opportunity. Can you talk about what you think as being some of the opportunities that you see for industrial sectors in this transition, specifically as you probably evaluate a lot of assets that fall into that category?
Yeah, I should say, Mark Carney said that. I didn't. I repeated it. So it always fascinating, always idiosyncratic, but particularly in the kind of broader industrial space, such a wide range of climate opportunities, from the relatively obvious, like putting solar panels on your roof, to I think a great example that came up in conversation was the ability to create a whole new business line if you're a kind of manufacturing services provider, helping your own B2B clients bring green technologies into their operations. And then some things that are really unexpected and niche, and again, they're not things that we're spitting out as hyper-specific recommendations for the platform, but they've come out through our analysis and the conversations that have followed with, if you're a railroad provider, for example, in particular parts of the US, you may find that there's a growth in your business being driven by this kind of, whilst we're transitioning, this desire for lower carbon forms of transport. So until we have long distance trucks powered by batteries or hydrogen, even if it's a diesel powered locomotive, if it's a really modern one, that might actually be something that you could push out to your potential customers as a transition, as a lower carbon form of long distance ground transportation.
Interesting. I guess when you look at how people, use the information that you all provide, do you see there being, you say maybe they go have a conversation with the head of risk, or maybe they have a conversation with, the fund manager, and you look at sort of these challenges that might happen within the industrial space with respect to, a locomotive company might having an opportunity to utilize their positionality over the course of 5 or 7 years to take advantage of an opportunity. How do you think, in general, people respond, at least the financial managers respond, the fund managers respond to this idea of, balancing financial benefit or gain against these sort of climate issues, right? So obviously, the ones that are clear financially net positives are easy to adopt, but what about those ones that may not necessarily be financially advantageous for the companies in the portfolio? How, have you ever had conversations with the fund managers to see how they sort of balance that and use it for their own decision making?
I think that there are a lot of people looking to find climate value opportunities in different ways. That's not a unique perspective that we're bringing. And so generally our clients are really open and responsive to anything that we surface that maybe they haven't thought of before, and particularly the work we do aggregating different climate technologies. That is an endlessly fascinating information source, where some of the things that we'll bring up, one of the companies we often demo with is in the building services space. And the list of technologies that comes up there in terms of new, really mature, ready to deploy kinds of insulation, for example, that are no more expensive than what you might be doing already. New kinds of heating and cooling, new kinds of site operations infrastructure. Like, those are often great conversation starters, and it's simply that awareness is something to explore. But I think things fall into different categories as well. And there's the dream state where you are able to set up a very lucrative, fast-growing new business line, serving a whole range of clients with green solutions. And some companies can do that, and that's amazing. I think where a little bit more common and where there's often a kind of a more blurred line between, is this really a climate impact question or is it a financial upside question, is when you're looking at the question of procurement. What are your main buyers starting to mandate for their supply chain?
Okay.
So what is Amazon, what is Microsoft saying about the packaging or the shipment for their products, or the kinds of commitments they expect their suppliers to have in place in terms of their emissions reduction plans, and so on. So what are my supply chain pressures? And it's not like I'm necessarily going to make more money by doing this, but it's certainly a financial consideration. Like, it looks like the people who I fundamentally rely on directly or indirectly to create demand for my products are starting to shift the way that they're thinking about this issue. I need to be aware of that and to be aware about how I start to then transition my operations accordingly.
When you think about the future of Unwritten, where do you see it in 3 to 5 years?
I would love to be able to move more and more into the provision of solutions.
Okay.
So the kind of very tangible levers that our clients have and that their stakeholders have to enact that so what, to find that climate value. So, for example, one thing that we surface now is companies' potential ability to align with the EU taxonomy. Sounds super stale, but the reason that's really relevant is if you want to go out and raise sustainability-linked debt, which may well be a really effective, cheaper financing option, then that kind of assessment, a kind of alignment process, it could be a really, really useful tool or a necessary part of the process for you to do that. So I can totally see a world in which we're able to move from being or a really good, I hope, and valuable intelligence and data platform through to a workflow tool where you're connected to the levers to raise green debt, to make your buildings more resilient, and in the future we hope that will have an impact on your insurance premiums.
And to be able to participate financially in helping to broker those relationships or to make that connection from and recommendation to implementation.
Exactly.
Well, now, unless there's anything else you want to share, I want to move into our rapid fire question period.
Let's do it.
All right. These are questions that we ask our founders whenever they're around. And I'm going to throw them at you quickly. What's one thing you wish you knew before you started your business?
It is very, very hard to go after more than one type of customer. I wish I'd understood that better. I also kind of wish I knew a little bit more about the whole world of investment and the buy side that we've ended up working in. But that knowledge has come very quickly as we've built the business. But I think at the start we'd have said, we're kind of targeting all investors who think about numbers, right? And that's just impossible. And our lives have become so much easier, and we've felt that we've built a better product and a better process for articulating the value of that product because we've honed in on one group of people who have a shared set of problems that we think we can help them with. It's very 101 startup advice, but once you find it, the world just feels a little easier.
What's the hardest part about being an entrepreneur that no one talks about?
You will experience a lot of rejection. I think this is probably also the best part or the most useful part of being an entrepreneur. But I wouldn't recommend this job to you if rejection is something you find very, very difficult, because it's all the way through. It's fundraising, it's sales, it's hiring.
People constantly telling you no,
or just ignoring you.
Which is sometimes better.
Which is sometimes better. But no, if you are always willing to able to try and interpret those rejections, because they don't all mean the same thing, and improve your product, improve your process, come back again at the right moment, there is no faster way to learn,
What's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
I think that I don't know if this is a very direct answer, if it's advice or more kind of aphoristic, but the year that you did Schwartzman, I'm not sure we'd have had the same leadership professor.
No, I think you had I had Daniel Armanios. You had a different guy.
Someone different. Charismatic figure, loved coming out with these very definitively articulated kind of aphoristic statements. But one thing that he said was, organizations will always change you more than you can change them. And that really stuck with me, and it stuck with me particularly as I've thought about what have I taken from my experience at Palantir and I've brought to this business. without even realizing it. And look, we've built a data business, so that's part of it.
Yeah.
But there are also some things I definitely, that I don't think Palantir did brilliantly, or that it did brilliantly that it would not be applicable to what we're doing. And I've tried to be quite carefully aware of where my hidden assumptions, my defaults were shaped by the experience I had there.
If you could have dinner with any founder, dead or alive, who would you be?
Some recency bias here. I was in New York for New York Climate Week. I had the opportunity to hear Al Gore speak, founder of Generation Investment Management. I was very, very taken by meeting a climate, the longest standing climate hero of mine. I was in a large audience, but
You were there,
witnessing,
yeah.
and I felt like he'd be a great person to have dinner with. He's very charismatic, has a kind of particular brand of eloquence that's very enjoyable to listen to. I'm not sure if I'd really want to have a conversation so much as just kind of listen to him speak. But you can have dinners like that where you just listen in.
Sometimes those are good ones. Yeah. What's one failure that turned into a huge opportunity for you?
At the very start of setting up Unwritten, we actually were a team of three co-founders, and that didn't work out. It wasn't the right team dynamic. One of the co-founders stepped back at the time, and I'd quit my job to build this business, and I'd lost the person who was at the time the CEO. And so I thought, this is absolutely dead in the water. I better start job hunting, hit really hard. Wondered what I'd done to kind of
facilitate.
Well, yes, to precipitate. I actually think that the dynamic that Philip and I have as a team is a better dynamic than we'd have had as a three, and has worked well up to this point, and of course has been a huge opportunity for both of us.
What's your ultimate productivity hack?
Getting enough sleep and Superhuman.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Superhuman?
I'm very familiar with Superhuman, yes.
Yeah, I love Superhuman.
What's one book, and we'll expand it out, in case you want to give a podcast or, a piece of media in general that you feel every founder should consume?
I had a think about this. I did an English degree, so I thought maybe I should say something just really literary. Everyone should have read X, Middlemarch. But I landed on David Graeber, Debt, The First 5,000 Years. The reason I think that is a very relevant book to any founder is it will take any conception that you have about money and turn it on its head 3 or 4 times and tie it to every other power and economic construct you've ever come across. And I think as a founder, you will spend a lot of time thinking and talking about money. And so unpicking all of the assumptions that you have about money is a pretty good way to start.
What's one habit that you feel like has transformed your business?
We have, I think, tried quite hard to build the right sort of culture in our team and in a way that scales. And we haven't grown super aggressively, but even going from 2 founders to a team of 5 to a team of 10, the cultures kind of don't easily translate. And one thing that's really stuck is giving people flexibility on when they're in the office or not, but having meals together as a group. We could brunch on Mondays and lunch a couple of times a week, and not setting a particularly structured agenda. I mean, sometimes I'll come in on a Monday with like an idea in my head, and as I've been cycling into the office, and I'll give it a little lecture. I know that happens from time to time, but generally just trying to get people to chat, and it makes sure that the sales team understands what the product team is feeling, and vice versa. That seems to have worked really well.
And my last question for you is, if you could only use one app to run the business, what would the application of choice be?
I mean, the really boring answer is G Suite, Google Suite. Sure, you could run a business on that. Fine. I think actually a whiteboard, a very large whiteboard, you could probably run almost everything we do aside from, all the technical stuff on that whiteboard. When we started, we signed up for Monday.
Okay.
And we were paying quite a lot. I mean,
yeah, it's not cheap.
It's not cheap. And then we cancelled our subscription. And with the cost of 1 month subscription, we bought this huge whiteboard. And it's quite a lot more effective, I think. At least because it's there all the time.
Such a good whiteboarding session, putting all the things up there. It really keeps people accountable.
Yeah.
Well, Amos, thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to learn about you and your journey, and to tell us about Unwritten and its plans for domination within the reporting space as it relates to climate, and not just reporting, but obviously helping make decisions and hopefully eventually connecting with the right service providers and partners that can help fund managers and companies exercise that. It's really exciting to see the growth, and we look forward to following the journey down the line.
Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, excellent.